We're on the bottom of Ayin Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. Amaula. So the Gemara here is going to talk about the carbon Shalmei Simcha and the Chagiga of Yontif, not going to get to Pesach, not going to get to the carbon Chagiga of Erev Pesach, but the carbon of Yontif. So Ula said, Amaula Amar Rabbi Lazar, the name of Rabbi Lazar. Shlomim, you have a carbon Shlomim. Sheshachtan me'erev Yontif. So he's bringing this for a Shalmei Simcha, but he didn't shecht it on Yontif itself. It's brought on Erev Yontif. And now he has the meat that he can eat on Yontif, for the Simchas Yontif. Eine Yaitze ben, he won't be Yaitze with this, Loi Mishum Simcha, not for the mitzvah of bringing the Shalmei Simcha, the Loi Mishum Chagiga. And also if he wants to be Yaitze with this, with the Chagiga that has to be brought on Yontif, he also not Yaitze. Why not? Mishum Simcha, for the carbon of Shalmei Simcha, you're not Yaitze, the Chsiv, V'zavachta v'samachta. You shecht it and you eat it and you have the simcha of Yom Tov. And you learn from this, Be'inan zviche b'shah simcha. The shechting of the Shalmei Simcha has to be on Yom Tov itself in the time when the mitzvah of the simcha is veleke. And you don't have that if you shechted it on Erev Yom Tov. Mishum chagige. You also not yaitze if you shechted it on Erev Yom Tov for chagige, because havadava shebechayva. The carbon chagige, there's a chiyuv to bring this carbon, and the rule is V'chol davar shebechayve, anything that's brought as a chiyuv, eina ba ela min hachulin. You have to bring it from something that was chulin, and this is a carbon that was designated as a shlomim before, and therefore you're not yaitze. So there are two pshatim in this Gemara. One pshat in this Gemara is, according to what the simple pshat of what it says here in the Gemara, so even if you would bring it on Yontif itself, you wouldn't be yaitze, because it was already designated as a shlomim. So if he's going to bring it as a chagige, so he's not going to be yaitze. The chagige has to be brought from chulin. Whether he brought it on Erev Yontif, whether he brought it on Yontif, he's not going to be yaitze. Taisus' pshat in the Gemara is that we're talking over here about a carbon that was designated as a chagiga. And what the Gemara is saying is, just like we know the din is that a davar shebechayva has to be brought from something min hachulin, so too we learn out that it has to also be brought in the right time, on Yontif itself. The carbon chagiga, even if it was designated as a chagiga, if it's brought on Erev Yontif, it's not the right time, it has to be brought on Yontif itself. That's Taisus' pshat. Yeah, Chagiga, Shalmei Simcha, these are karbanis of the Yachid, yeah. Sag the Gemara. Huh?
Bring before Yontif, shecht on Yontif.
You makdish it before Yontif, but you have to shecht it on Yontif itself. Okay, it has to be brought on Yontif. Lei me misayeh lei. Should we say we have a raya to this statement here from Ula, the name of Rabbi Lazar, because it says in the Braise, v'hayisa ach sameach. The Torah says, "Vayisa ach sameach" by Sukkos, and this is an extra pasuk. It already said before, "V'samachta b'chagecha." L'rabbis leile yontif v'achron l'simcha. So this pasuk is coming to add that the last night of Yontif, which is the 8th night, you also chayav in simcha. When it said in the beginning simcha, it says shivas yomim, and it says v'samachta b'chagecha. So that's 7 days. So it says v'hayisa ach sameach to add also the last night of Shmini Atzeres. Oyena yelalela Yontif harishon. Maybe when it says Vayisach Sameach, it's coming to add that you have to be B'simcha also the first night. Talmud Loimar, Ach. When the Torah says Ach Sameach, it says the word Ach. What does the word Ach mean? Ach Chalak. Ach is coming to separate, and it's coming to exclude. To tell you that the first night of Yontif, there's no mitzvah of Simcha. The mitzvah of Simcha starts the first day. So now the Gemara explains. So we have one ribui and one marbe the last night, and we have a miut and one marbe and we're mamayit, that is the first night. So why do we learn it this way? My time, why do you think that we're mamayit, that we exclude the first night of Yontif from the mitzvah of Simcha? Lav isn't the reason. Mishum de'en loy b'mei yismach, because he still doesn't have a carbon that he shechter, that he can eat the meat to have the Simchas Yontif. Like Ola just said, you can't shechter on Erev Yontif to have the meat ready for you on the first night. You shecht it only starting on Yontif itself, which is the first day. So therefore there's no simcha the first night. So Zok the Gemara, no, that's not the reason. Loi, the reason is not like Ola said, but rather kedutani taima. It says further in that Braise the reason why we're marba the last night and we're not marba the first night. And the Braise says as follows: Mara isa l'rabbis leila yom tov ha'achron. Why do we add and include the last night of Yontif, the night of Shmini Atzeres, part of the Simcha, Ulahaitzi Leila Yontif Rishon, and you're excluding that the first night of Yontif there's no mitzvah of Simcha yet? And the Braise answers, Marbani Leila Yontif Achrein, I'm being marba the last night, Sheyesh Simcha Lefanov. Because there's a Simcha that's already taking place for 7 days, so I'm just continuing the Simcha. So that's less of a chiddush to say that I'm continuing the simcha. Umaytziani leila yontif rishayin, and I do not include the first night of yontif she'ein simcha lefanav. The simcha did not begin yet. The simcha begins the first day. So to be mechadish that you started the night before, that's a bigger chiddush. So therefore, I'm marbe the smaller chiddush and I might see the first night. But the reason is not based on what Ola said, because you can't shech the carbon before. Mastav Rav Yosef asked a question on what Ola said from this Braise. It says in the Braise, Chagiga Sarba Asar. If you have the carbon Chagiga that was designated to be brought on Erev Pesach together with the carbon Pesach, Yaitze Ba Mishum Simcha. You can be Yaitze with that carbon for the Shalmei Simcha. Ve'en Yaitze Ba Mishum Chagiga. But you can't be Yaitze with it for the Chagiga. So the question is, how could you use that carbon for the Shalmei Simcha? Didn't Ola say that it has to be shechter on Yontif? And this is the Chagiga from the 14th day. So how could you be Yaitze the Shalmei Simcha? Amarav Idi Baravin. So Rav Idi Baravin says the pshat in this brayse is she'ikev v'shachta. He ended up leaving it. He didn't shecht it on the 14th on Erev Pesach. He shechted it on Yontif itself, and then you yaitze with it for Shalmei Simcha. Amarav Ashi. He what? Shalmei Simcha, yeah. Not at night. The next day. He brought it the first day. He brought it by day. Instead of bringing it on Yudalid, which is what it was designated for, he left it to the next day, and he brought it for a Shalmei Simcha. So he did bring it on Yontif itself. And it's logical to say that this is what the Braise is speaking about. If you're not going to say that he left it until the first day of Yontif, who is the Tana of this Braise? Ben Taimeh. The Ben Taimeh is the Tana of this Braise. The beginning of that Braise was on Daf Ayin Amar Aleph. It spoke about the fact that Chagigas Arba Asar is the same as a Pesach, that it could only be eaten for one day and a night. So this Braise is Ben Taimeh. So Ben Taimeh, Hapostol Abalina. Ben Taimeh says that the Chagiga of Erev Pesach, you could only eat it that day and that night. You can't eat it the next day. So if you're telling me that it was brought on Erev Pesach, how could it be used for the Shalmei Simcha for the next morning? The next morning it's already possible. So Shma Mina, it must be that it was left until the next day on Yontif, and it was brought on Yontif itself, and therefore it's Yaitze with it, the Shalmei Simcha. So it fits with what Ola said. You can't bring it before Yontif. Masiv Rav asked the question from this that it says in the Mishnah, Ha'halel v'hasimcha. So it says in the Mishnah regarding Sukkos that the days of saying Halal on Sukkos, the whole Halal, and also the Simcha of Yom Tov on Sukkos is Shmeina, all 8 days. Now, if you're going to tell me that the carbon of the Shalmei Simcha cannot be shechted before Yontif, it has to be shechted on one of the days of Yontif itself. So Hazimnin Sagiyin, many times, that he's only going to have 7 days of Simchas Yontif. How? Kagoin, Shechal Yontif Arishon Liyas b'Shabbos. If the first day of Yontif falls out on Shabbos, so he couldn't shech the carbon before Yontif. When does he shech his carbon? On the second day of Yontif. So he only starts the Simcha with the carbon of Shalmei Simcha on the second day of Yontif. That's what the Simcha consists of. What does the Simcha consist of? Eating the meat of the carbon Shlomim. So in such a scenario, it only starts from the second day of Yontif. So how could you tell me that it's all 8 days? In such a case, when the first day was Shabbos, so he couldn't shech the Shalmei Simcha, but there's still other special karbanis that were brought for Yom Tif. There's the karbanis tzibur, the karbanis musif, the special karbanis that were brought for Yom Tif, and that's what the Simcha is with on the first day of Shabbos. So therefore, the Simcha is all 8 days.
Not with eating it.
Oh, so the Gemara asks right now, Amar Rave, so Rave said on this answer, Shtei Tshuvas B'Davar. I have 2 answers to your suggestion that the Simcha is going to be with the Seirei Aragolim. Chada, number 1, the Seirei Aragolim, Nachol and Chai. Chai Nachol, that is. The Seirei Aragolim, even if it is eaten, it can't be roasted, it's Shabbos. So if it can be eaten, it can only be eaten raw. And tzli einacholin. It can't be eaten roasted. And v'simcha b'chai leke. Having meat that you're eating raw, that doesn't bring any simcha.
That's before they know about sushi.
Okay. V'oid, another question. Kayanim oichlin. It's the kayanim that eat these karbanis. But Yisrael, b'mes meichim. So what simcha do Yidden have? 8 days. So it only answers it regarding kayanim. It says in the Mishnah, halva simcha is 8 days for all Yidden. Alama Rav Papa, so Rav Papa answered a different answer. Misamchoi b'ksus nikiya v'yayin yoshan. When it said over here in the Mishnah that the simcha is 8 days, it means even if Shabbos falls out the first day and you can't have the simcha on the first day because there's no carbon, but the simcha consists of having new clothing and good wine, that's also simcha. So the fulfillment of simcha 8 days is either with the carbon shlamim, and if not, it's with ksus nikiya and yayin yoshan. So this was all Rabbi Elazar's opinion in the name of Ula. Ula said that the carbon of Shalmei Simcha must be brought on Yontif itself. But now the Gemara brings another opinion. Ki asa Ravin, when Ravin came to Bavel, Amar Rabbi Elazar, he said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Shlomim, Sheshachtan me'erev Yontif, the carbon of Shalmei Simcha, that you shechted it, on Erev Yontif, Yoitze ben Mishum Simcha. You will be Yoitze, the mitzvah of Shalmei Simcha. But ve'en Yoitze ben Mishum Chagige. You're not Yoitze with the carbon Chagige. Yoitze Mishum Simcha, with the mitzvah of Simcha, you are Yoitze. Loi be'inan zviche b'shah Simcha. Because the carbon does not have to be shechted in the time of the obligation of the Simcha. Right? So in other words, the point is very simple. Once you shechted it a day before an Erev Yontif, you have the meat. You have the meat to eat on Yontif, and that's the simcha. It doesn't have to be shechted in the time of the simcha. He didn't hold of the drasha that we said before, v'zavachta v'samachta. So you can shecht it a day before. And v'loi mishum chagige. However, for the chagige, it cannot be brought before Yontif, or maybe even on Yontif itself, if it was designated for a shlomim. Havadavasha b'chayva, because the chagige, there's an obligation to bring it as a carbon. V'choldavasha b'chayva, einaba elemen acholin. Any carbon that's a chiyuv, you cannot use a carbon that was already designated as a shlomim to bring it for the chagige. So this is the opinion of Ravin, and we paskin actually, like Ravin, that the carbon of Shalmei Simcha could be brought from before Yontif. So this opinion of Ravin has an afkemina also been again to what it said before in the Gemara. Before the Gemara said, Mesamchoi b'ksus nikiya v'yayin yoshan, that's what the Simchas Yom Tov consists of. And that was an answer only according to Ula, that says that you can't bring the Shalmei Simcha on Yom Tov itself. According to Ravin, you could always bring the Shalmei Simcha on Erev Yom Tov. So according to him, Bisman Shabbos Hamikdash Kayam, you can't be Yaitze Simchas Yom Tov with Ksus Nikiya and Yayin Yoshan. As the daf could be with Basar, with the Shalmei Simcha. And that's what the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch, that Bisman Shabbos Hamikdash Kayam, Simchas Yom Tov consists only dafke from Basar. Only today, Bisman Hazeh, when we don't have the Shalmei Simcha, so the Simcha consists of wine. Ein Simcha ele b'yayin. That's how we paskin. So the Gemara Meisvei, so the question was asked on Ravin's opinion that it could be brought from before Yom Tov. So we bring the same brayso that we brought before. V'hayisa ach sameach. So it says again a lashon of simcha a second time. So what is this adding? L'rabbeis leila Yom Tov achren. Comes to tell me that even the last night, the 8th night, you lech simcha, that you chayiv in simcha. And you tell me it's coming to add the last night. Maybe it's coming to add the first night. When the Torah says ach, it's dividing or it's excluding, telling you that you're not chayiv in simcha the first night. So my time, what do you think is the reason that you're not chayiv in Simchas Yom Tov the first night? Lav mishum dein le b'mei yismach. He still did not shecht the carbon Shalmei Simcha, so you don't have the meat for the carbon. You could only shecht it on Yom Tov itself. So this is a question on Ravin that said that it could be shechted on Erev Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, loy kedetanya, like the Braisa says, which was quoted before already. Mara isal rabes leila Yom Tov achna lahoitzi leila Yom Tov rishain. Why are you saying that the last night of Yom Tov, the 8th night, is included in Simcha, and the first night is not? Marbani leila Yom Tov achna sheyesh Simcha lefanov. The last night is included because it's continuing the Simcha that was there before. Umaitzi leila Yom Tov rishain, and the first night is not included. Shein Simcha lefanov. There's no simcha that has begun yet from before, so therefore that's a bigger chiddush, and we don't include that in the simcha. So this is not a question on Ravin. Omar Rav Kahane, now the Gemara starts a new subject. Rav Kahane here said, this is regarding the emurim of the carbon, the pieces of the carbon that is brought for the carbon chagige. We're talking about now the chagige of Yontif itself. So the Gemara is going to discuss, Rav Kahane here brings a source regarding the emurim. Until when could you be makrivit on the mizbeach? So Amar Rav Kahane, in Menayim, from where do I know? Le'emure chagigas chamisha asar. The emurim, the parts of the carbon that are brought on the mizbeach of the carbon chagiga that's brought on Yontif, shenifsalen belina, that it could only be brought that night. If you leave it to the next morning, it's possible. You can't be makrivit on the mizbeach anymore. So the source is Shanemar. The pasuk says, "V'lo yolin Chelev chagi ad boiker. Do not leave over the fats that are supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach until the morning. Now, which morning are we talking about? Are we talking about the following morning? Maybe we're talking about the second or the third or another morning. How do we know which morning it's talking about? The Samech Lei, and right after this pasuk it says in the next pasuk, Reishis. Even though it's talking in the simple pshat, it's talking about a different Inyan. In the next pasuk it says Reishis Bikure ad Mascha. But what we darshan is Boiker Reishis. We read it together. That the first following morning after you brought the carbon, if you leave over the fats and it wasn't brought on the Mizbeach, it's possible. You can't bring it on the Mizbeach anymore. This is where you learn it out from. Taisva says, the last Taisva here, one line, Taisva says, Mahacha nafke b'chol emurim. This is not only talking about this particular carbon of the Chagiga on Pesach, but from here you learn out, this is the halacha regarding any carbon that you have the time to be market of it all night. If you left it till the next morning, it's possible. This is the source regarding all karbanis. So, the Gemara, Lememre, should I say, the high boiker, sorry, this is not the question. The question comes right after this. Let me just read it again. The Samech Le Reishis, the Torah says Reishis, Lememre, to teach you the high boiker boikerishe. That the boiker over here is the following morning. Okay, now comes the question. Mas geflor Rav Yosef asked on this, on Rav Kahane, time the kosav reishis. The only reason you're saying that when it says until the following morning, that it means the following morning and not the next morning, the second morning, because the Torah wrote reishis. But haloi kosav reishis, if it would not say reishis, hava mine mai boike, then I would have thought, what is the meaning of boike? Boike sheni. That maybe it's the second morning. You have the whole following day and night to bring the carbon until the next morning. Fragt the Gemara, how could that be? Why would I have a minute to say such a thing? Mi ikemidi. Do I ever find a case, the basar ifsele me'urta, that the meat is already possible to eat from that night, ve'emurin at safra, and the pieces of the carbon that are brought in the mizbeach, you could bring it even the next morning. Is it possible such a thing? Over here we're talking about a carbon that was brought on Erev Pesach, and it could only be eaten one day and one night, and the next morning it can't be brought anymore, and you're telling me that the emurin could be brought even later than the time when the basar itself could be eaten? Amalei Abayes.
Referring to any carbon shlom, that you can have Laila, Shnei Yomim.
Correct, but you have
the same question.
Yeah, in such a case, correct. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye asks on this question, but Rav Yosef's question is not a good question. Alam aloi, why wouldn't you say that there's a case where you could eat basar only up until one point, and you can be makir of it even later? I'll bring you an example for that from the carbon Pesach itself. Vaharei Pesach. What's the halacha by carbon Pesach? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. What's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's opinion? The basar ifsele mechatzais. You could only eat the carbon Pesach until chatzais. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's opinion. And by veimurin, the parts of the carbon on the mizbeach is at safra. You can bring it until the morning. So I see that the emurin could be brought even later than the basar that could be eaten. So this is not a question. So Rav explained that Rav Yosef Rav Yosef was misquoted, and really his question is as follows: Mi ikemidi. Do we ever find something? The ilu tana le basar, when the Tana speaks about the subject of the basar that could be eaten from the carbon, loy boy reishis. He does not need the word reishis to teach me that the word boiker means the following morning and not the second morning. As the Gemara is going to quote in a second here, a braisa, that we see clearly in a braisa, when it comes to the basar that's eaten in a carbon, when the Torah writes reishis, when the Torah writes boiker, that is, boiker means the following morning and not the second morning. So that's when it comes to the basar. V'Rav Kahane le'emurin boy reishis, and Rav Kahane, when it comes to the boiker, that it says by the parts of the carbon brought in the mizbeach over there, the Torah has to write reishis. So as Rashi explains, the emurin are more chamor than the basar itself. That's what Rashi says in the first wide line. V'Rav Kahane be'emurin the chamire kedushasayu. What has a higher level of kedusha? The basar that you could eat, or the emurin that are brought in the mizbeach? The emurin that are brought in the mizbeach have a higher level of kedusha. When it comes to the basar, and the Torah says boiker, we say that it means the first morning. You could only eat it to the first morning, as the Gemara is going to demonstrate in a moment. When it comes to the emurin, and the Torah writes boiker, I would say it means the second morning, if not for the fact that the Torah wrote reishis. That's what Rav Kahane is saying. Why would I say that regarding the emurin that have a higher level of kedusha? So where do you find regarding the basar that the Torah that writes Baiker, it means the following morning and not the second morning? And here the Gemara is going to bring a Braisa and interpret the Braisa, and only towards the end of this, right by the Mishnah, will the Gemara explain where you see this. But first the Braisa. Tanya, the Braisa says, it says in the pasuk as follows: Lo yolin min abasar asher tizbach ba'erev ba'yoyim harishon laBaiker. Don't leave over the meat that you shechted ba'erev for the yoyim harishon laBaiker. So what is this talking about? Says the Gemara, this pasuk is talking about the Chagiga of Yud Dalet. Limed al Chagigas Yud Dalet. From this pasuk I see regarding the Chagiga that's brought together with the Korban Pesach on Yud Dalet, shenacheles l'shnei yomim v'layla echad, that you could eat it for 2 days and a night. How do we know that it's talking about the Chagiga of Yud Dalet? So Rashi says, because the lashon of the pasuk is lo yolin. Well, the beginning of that pasuk actually says v'lo yira l'chasar b'chol gvul chosheves yomim. So it's talking about Pesach, and then it says v'lo yolin min abas asher tizbach ba'erev b'yom harishon laBaiker. So what is ba'erev? Says Rashi, ba'erev refers to the Korban Chagiga that's brought together with the Korban Pesach. That's the Korban that's brought bein arbayim. Korban Pesach is brought bein arbayim, and the Chagiga is brought together with it ba'erev, on Erev Pesach. So regarding that pasuk, regarding that Korban, it says, don't leave it over till when? Till Bayayim Harishon laBaiker. So the Gemara says, you know what Bayayim Harishon laBaiker means? It means that you actually have 2 days and a night. That's the taisha of this pasuk. So the Braisa says, Oy einoi elo liyoyim v'layla. Maybe it means you only have 1 day and a night, only that day on Erev Pesach that you brought the Korban, and the following night, and then the next morning it's already puzzle. You can't eat it anymore. So the Gemara, so the Braisa says, no. Keshu oimer, Bayayim Harishon, when it says Bayayim Harishon, Hare Baiker Sheni Omor. So because it says Bayayim Harishon, what is it telling me? That you can eat it Bayayim Harishon, and then the Baiker following the Yom Harishon, which is the second Baiker, that's until when you can eat it. That's when only the second Baiker is when you can't eat it anymore. So if it would have said Lo Yolin La Baiker, I would say that it means the following morning. But because it says Be'erev Bayayim Harishon laBaiker, so Bayayim Harishon laBaiker means that Bayayim Harishon you could still eat it, but then laBaiker, the second Baiker, that's when you can't eat it. Then the Braisa continues, oh yeah, no, or maybe, no, maybe the Braisa goes back on what it just said before. Maybe I should say, Ella Baiker Rishon, that Baiker over here means that I only eat it until the first morning and not more than that. The Gemara will right away ask soon, didn't we just explain that because it says Bayayim Harishon la Baiker, so therefore it means the second morning? So why is the Braisa asking this question again? The Gemara will explain. But the Braisa asks, maybe I should say that it means that first morning. Now, Umani Mekayim Chagiga Hanacheles L'Shnei Yomim V'Layla Echad. What am I going to do with this that we know that a Chagiga could be eaten for 2 days and a night? We know this halacha that a Chagiga could be eaten for 2 days and a night. So if he's saying that over here it could only be eaten for 1 day and a night, so where do I find, where is there a Chagiga that can be eaten for 2 days and a night? So I would have to say Chutz Mizu. That excludes this Chagiga. The Chagiga of Yud Dalet cannot be eaten for 2 days and a night. It could only be eaten for the first day and the following night. That's the question that the Braisa is asking here. Maybe I should say so. So now we learn out from this pasuk, Keshehu Oimer Boy, when it says regarding a Korban Shlomim. So the Gemara here brings a pasuk that says B'chlal, by every Korban Shlomim. What does it say? Im Neder Oy Nedava. What does it say in the continuation of that pasuk? Im Neder Oy Nedava. So it says there, you see, have the pasuk here on the side, B'yoyim akriva yezivcha yeyachel. Umi macharas v'hanoisa mimena yachol. So it says clearly in that pasuk that you could eat it for 2 days and a night. So Rashi says the diak over here is, it doesn't say neder oy nedava, it says im neder oy nedava. So that extra word im, so limeid, it comes to teach me al chagigas Yud Dalet. It tells me regarding the chagiga of Yud Dalet shenacheles l'shnei yomim v'layla echad, that you could eat it for 2 days and a night. So this Braisa here is having a discussion. It's going back and forth regarding the Korban Chagiga of Erev Pesach, whether it could be eaten only for 1 day and a night, or 2 days and a night, back and forth. So the Gemara now explains exactly what the discussion of this Tana and this Braisa was. So, Mamar, Tana the Braisa asked, maybe over here it's telling you that you could only eat it until the first morning and not the second morning. That was the question he asked. Fragt the Gemara, how could you ask this? Didn't he already explain? Because it says Bayom Ha-Rishain and then it says La Boiker. Hare Boiker Sheni Omer. So from that I know that we're talking about the second morning. So why is the Braisa asking this question again? Says the Gemara, Hachi Ka'amar. This is what the Braisa meant to ask. Maybe I should say, B'shtei Chagigis HaKosav Medaber. Maybe I have to split this pasuk, and the pasuk is talking about two different carbon Chagigis. Achas Chagigas Yudalit. The pasuk is talking about the Chagiga of Erev Pesach of Yudalit, and Va'achas Chagigas Tesvav. And it's also talking about the Chagiga of Yom Tov itself that you bring on the first day of Yom Tov. Vizu lebaikra and vizu lebaikra. And both of them you could only eat until the first following morning. So as Rashi explains, what the Gemara is suggesting is the way you would read the pasuk is Lo yalin min habasa shetizbach ba'erev. Don't leave over from that basa that you shechted the day before. Period. That's going on the carbon of Yudalit, and it's telling you don't leave it over to the following morning. And then when it says Bayom Ha-Rishain La Boiker, what it's saying is the carbon that you shecht on the first day of Pesach, that's the second Chagiga, that you shouldn't leave over until the following morning. So maybe there are two different karbanis that this pasuk is talking about, and it's telling you for both of them that you could only eat it for that day and the following night, and the next morning you can't eat it anymore. That's the question that the Braisa was asking. So on this the Braisa says, Elo the Kaimelam. But this that we know, that Chagiga Hanacheles L'Shnei Yomim V'Layla Echad, that there is a carbon Chagiga that could be eaten for 2 days and a night. So Im Kain, if so, Im Neder Oy Nedava, this pasuk of Im Neder Oy Nedava, which again is a pasuk that says by carbon Shlomim, but because it says an extra word Im, I'm marbe from there, I include also one of the karbanis Chagige that can be eaten 2 days and a night, like the carbon Shlomim. So B'mai, regarding what are you going to say that the ribui of Im Neder and Nedav is going on? If you're going to say it's going regarding the Chagiga of Yudalid, Haksiv Bayom V'Layla. You just said that you could only eat it for the first day and the following night. If it's going regarding the Chagiga of Tezvav, Haksiv Bayom V'Layla. You just said that when it says Larishaim LaBoiker, Bayom Erishaim LaBoiker, that it means you could only eat it until the following morning. So for both Karbanis Chagiga, you're saying you could only eat it 1 day and 1 night. So for what are we darshaning in Neder and Nedava to tell me that there's a Karban Chagiga that could be eaten for 2 days and a night? So therefore the Gemara says, Elo, we're going to have to say, Hai lechagigas tezvav. That really the drasha of Im Neder and Nedava, from that's the pasuk again by Shlomim. From there I learn out that the Chagiga of Tezvav can be eaten for 2 days and a night. That's what it goes on. So Rashi over here says that it goes on that carbon Chagiga because it doesn't come together with the carbon Pesach. So it's not as stringent because it's not together with the carbon Pesach. There's a svara to say that it could only be eaten like the carbon Pesach until the following morning. So when I see that there's a riboy by the Shlomim, that there's another carbon, a carbon Chagiga that can be eaten for 2 days and a night, what do I put that on? It goes on the carbon Chagiga of Tezvav. So now if so I now know that the carbon Chagiga of Tezvav could be eaten for 2 days and a night. So now this pasuk over here, when it says, the pasuk that we began with, the pasuk of Lo Yolin Min Habasa Shetizbach Be'erev Bayom Erishaim LaBoiker, so that pasuk is only talking about the Chagiga of Yudalit. So limed a chagigas Yudalit, and now this pasuk is teaching me regarding the Chagiga of Yudalit, shenacheles l'shnei yomim v'laylo echad, that it can be eaten for 2 days and a night. How do I know that? Because it says Bayom Ha-Rishain La Boiker. Right? So if we would divide the pasuk and say that this pasuk is talking both about the Chagiga of Yudalit and the Chagiga of Tezvav, then I would say that both of them could only be eaten for 1 day and a night. But I can't do that because I have a drasha from Im Neder Ein Nedava. So from Im Neder Ein Nedava I know that at least the Chagiga of Tezvav could be eaten for 2 days and a night. So if so, this pasuk of Lo Yolin is also talking about only about one Chagiga, the Chagiga of Yudalit. And it's telling me that the Chagiga of Yudalit could be eaten for 2 days and a night. How do I know 2 days and a night? Because it doesn't say La Boiker. It says by Yom Rishon LaBoker. So therefore I know that you can eat it in the following day and then until the second morning. This is the conclusion of the Pshat of the Braisa. So now the Gemara says, the only reason I interpret that what does Boker mean the second morning is because it says by Yom Harishon LaBoker. The my Boker, Boker Sheni. Therefore I say that Boker means the Boker of the second morning. Otherwise, wherever the Torah writes the term Boker, Stome, Boker Rishon. Boker always means just the following morning. Even though it doesn't say the word Reishis. You don't need a special drasha of the word Reishis to tell me that it means the following morning. So this was the question that Rav Yosef asked on Rav Kahana. Why did Rav Kahana say that only because the Torah wrote Reishis do I know that the fats of the karbanis have to be burnt only until the following morning, even without Reishis? Whenever the Torah writes Boker, it means the following morning. So this refutes Rav Kahana's pshat. Zog the Mishnah. Ha-Pesach she-shochtoi shaloi l'shmoi b'Shabbos. A carbon Pesach that a person shechted on Shabbos, but he shechted it shaloi l'shmo. Chayiv olav chatos. He'll be chayiv a carbon chatos because it's puzzle. The carbon is puzzle. So therefore he wasn't yaitzer a mitzvah of Pesach, so it's not doiche Shabbos. So the person, let's say, made a mistake. He thought that even if he shechted it shaloi l'shmo, it's allowed. So he did it b'shoigig, so he's chayiv a chatos. B'shar kol hazvachim, any other karbanis, sheshachtan l'shem Pesach. Person took another carbon that was designated, let's say, for a shlomim, and he brought it l'shem Pesach on erev Pesach shechal b'Shabbos. So what's the halacha then? Will he be chayav a chatas for this or not? So im einon re'uyin, if it's from animals that are not fit to be used for a carbon Pesach, right? Let's say it's a nekeva, or it's not a year old, it's more than a year old, or different kinds of animals that are not fit for a carbon Pesach, and he shechted it for a carbon Pesach, so then everybody would agree that he's chayiv a carbon chatos. Because again, you're shechting something that's possible, that's b'chlal not roi for the carbon Pesach, and you didn't do any mitzvah of carbon Pesach, so it's totally possible. However, if you have a carbon that was designated for another carbon, but it's an animal that's fit to be also brought for a carbon Pesach, Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatos. Rabbi Eliezer says that you'll be chayev a chatos because it's not a carbon Pesach. Only carbon Pesach is doiche Shabbos. You shechted it, and it's really a different carbon, so therefore you'll be chayev chatos. Rabbi Yeshua paiter, but Rabbi Yeshua says that you'll be pater. And the reason Rabbi Yeshua holds you're going to be pater, as we'll see, that a big long discussion in the Gemara regarding this, that Rabbi Yeshua holds is a klal, ta b'dvar mitzvah, there's no chiyuv chatas. This individual was bringing a carbon, and the reason why he made a mistake and brought it for a Pesach is because he's so busy bringing the karbanos of Pesach, and he saw an animal which is fit to be brought for a carbon Pesach. Really, it was designated for a different carbon, so he made a mistake and he brought it for a Pesach. So he was ta b'dvar mitzvah. And Rashi says he actually has sort of a mitzvah also by bringing it, not the mitzvah of Pesach, but he brings it as a Pesach. It's going to be a shlomim. It's going to have the din of a shlomim. So therefore, because he was ta b'dvar mitzvah, so therefore he's pater from a carbon chatos. The tirda of the mitzvah brought him to do this, and he actually had somewhat of a mitzvah, so therefore he's pater. That's Rabbi Yeshua's chiddush. Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer asked Rabbi Yeshua, Ma ima Pesach. I'll tell you a kavachaymer. If the carbon Pesach, shuhu mutter l'shmoi, that you're allowed to bring it on erev Pesach shechalis b'Shabbos for the sake of the Pesach. Kashashina as shmoi, if he brought it for something else, like we said in the beginning, if he brought it shaloi l'shmo, chayiv, he'll be chayiv achatas for this. Zvachim shehein asurin l'shmon, any other carbon, a carbon shlomim, if you brought it on erev Pesach shechalis b'Shabbos, it's aser, and you'll be chayiv achatas for that. Keshashina as Shman, if he changed its name and he brought it for a carbon Pesach, ein edin sheyeh chayiv. Most definitely should be chayiv a carbon chatas, because this is a kind of carbon that is b'chlal not, you're not allowed to bring it b'chlal on erev Pesach shechal b'Shabbos. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua, so Rabbi Yeshua says, no, this is not a good kal v'chaymer. Im omred b'Pesach, by a carbon Pesach, the reason he'll be chayav achatos. If he changed it, if he brought it shaloi l'shma, sheshino b'dava aser. Instead of bringing it for what's intended to be for the carbon Pesach, he had in mind for something else, which is aser on Shabbos. That's why he brings a chatos. Toyma b'zvachim. However, if you're talking about other karbanis that were fit to be brought as a carbon Pesach, sheshinon b'davar hamuter, so he switched it. He had in mind to bring it for a carbon Pesach. He made a mistake and he thought that he's doing a mitzvah to bring it for the Karban Pesach. In such a case, he'll be parted from a chatas because of the concept of ta b'dvar mitzvah. He thought he's bringing it for a mitzvah and therefore he's parted. Oh, Malay Rabbi Eliezer brings a raya from another scenario. A murei tzibur yechichu. I'll bring you a raya from the Karbanis Tzibur. What's the halacha by the Karbanis Tzibur? Shehein mutarun l'shmon. Karbanis Tzibur could be brought on Shabbos if it's brought for the sake of the carbon. V'hashoichet l'shmon chayiv. But if you're going to bring any other carbon and you're having in mind that you're bringing it for the carbon Tzibur, you're going to be chayiv. If you take any, after the carbon tzibur was already brought, and now you're going ahead and bringing another carbon, thinking it's for that sake of the carbon tzibur, you're going to be chayiv. You're not doing any mitzvah with this. Rabbi Yeshua answered, no, there's no comparison from that case to the case that we're talking about over here, when a person brings another pasuk, another carbon that is, l'shem, carbon pesach. Light, there's no comparison. Im amrit be'murei tzibur, when it comes to the karbanis tzibur, sheyesh lan kitzvah. There's a set amount of karbanis tzibur that a person brings. So if someone else goes and brings any other carbon for the sake of a carbon tzibur, so then he's not being oisik in a mitzvah. He knows there's only a set amount of karbanis tzibur. So how did he make this mistake to bring another carbon for the sake of a carbon tzibur? So therefore, he'll be chayav achatas. Toima bePesach, which is not the case when it comes to a Pesach, she'ein like kitzvah. There's no set amount of karbanis Pesach. There's thousands or maybe millions of people that are bringing karbanis Pesach. So the person sees a carbon that's fit for a carbon Pesach. He thinks that it's a carbon Pesach. And that's why he's bringing it as a Pesach. He made a mistake because he's so tarot. He sees so many people bringing a carbon Pesach. So therefore, in such a case, he'll be potter if he brought it for a Pesach. Rab Meir argues on both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. And Rab Meir says, Af hashaychit l'shem emurei tzibur potter. Even a person that brought any other carbon, and he was thinking that he's bringing it for the carbon tzibur that's allowed to be brought on Shabbos, he's also going to be potter. Even though l'chayra the person shouldn't have made such a kind of mistake, but nevertheless, even this, he's potter. He did it thinking that he's doing it for the sake of a mitzvah, he'll be potter of a carbon chatas. You brought your carbon Pesach on Shabbos, and you had a mind for people that are not eating it. Shalolim nuyav, people that are not counted on it. La reilim, people that are oral that can't eat it. La tamein, other people that are tamei that can't eat it. Chayiv, in all these cases you chayiv a carbon chatas because you made it, you brought it in a way that it's possible. La oichlav, shaloi la oichlav, you had a mind for people that could eat it and can't eat it. La menuyav, shalolim nuyav, people that are counted and people that are not counted. La mulin, ula, reilin, la tamein, ula, tahayrin. So you had a mind for both. Potter. In such a case, you potter because the carbon is good. We learned this before in the Mishnah. As long as there's somebody that can eat it, so the carbon is kosher. So you yaitze the mitzvah of carbon Pesach. Shachtai. What happens if you shecht your carbon Pesach on Shabbos? V'nimtza bal mum, and you find it to have had a mum in its body. And this is something that you should have noticed from before. It's a mum outside of the body that you should have paid attention to. So then, chayev. You'll be chayev for the fact that you brought this on Shabbos because you were over on the Isra of B'shaygig. You should have checked it to see that it didn't have a mum. Shachtoi v'nimtza treife b'seiser. If you shechted it and then in one of the inner organs you see that it's a treifa, so then potter. That's not something you could have known b'chlal. It's an oinus. Shachtoi. What happens if you shechted it? V'noida shemoshcha abayla misyada. And then you find out that the owners of the carbon decided to remove themselves from this animal. Oy shemesu, or that the owner passed away. Oy shenitmu, or that they became tummy. So potter, again you're going to be potter. Because you shechted it permissibly. You didn't know that the owner decided this changed his mind, or did he died, or something happened to him. So in such a case, you'll be potter.